What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It was Ohio State's day 2 of training camp, fall camp, preseason camp, whatever you want to call it, Tim. 2 days.
It's summer, so I'm going to call it summer camp.
2 days are in the books. A little bit more overcast today. Maybe felt a little bit more like fall out there on the practice field for the Buckeyes. But 2 days down, 23 to go here in August. And we got to watch a little bit of practice, maybe a little more today than we got to watch yesterday. And then the main event, we got to talk to Tony Alford, Dallin Hayden, Miyan Williams, TreVeyon Henderson, and Evan Pryor, the entire running back room. A lot to break down here, Tim. What's your main takeaway after watching a little bit of practice and speaking to those tailbacks?
Well, I've been saying this all along. Ohio State definitely has a pair and a spare going into this season from a running back situation. And I think Dallin Hayden, from all reports, the thing they're trying to do is slow him down as opposed to speed him up. That's always a good sign, man. It's
Absolutely.
Like race car drivers, man. It's hard to get one to go faster, but it's a lot easier to slow them down. And basically, I followed up on the thing I've been following through since the spring too. I mean, they got to figure out a way to get Evan Pryor on the field, and they're doing that. Coach Tony Alford, one of the geniuses in the coaching profession. He says he resembles that remark. In essence, said that. I mean, just like Ryan Day has, they're going to figure out ways to get Evan Pryor on the field. But they're not going to forget about TreVeyon Henderson, one of the freshman standouts last year. But he got banged up quite a bit as that year went on. And of course, Mayan Williams, who I keep telling everybody, he's the guy that really went in and cracked open the safe against Utah in the Rose Bowl when they were really struggling running the ball and got things going there in that second quarter, especially. But I think they're in a really good situation at running back. But they've got 4 on scholarship. That's still a little bit troubling, I would think.
It's a little thin, Tim, but at the same time, if you can put 3 different guys on the field at running back number 1, I guess, and feel pretty confident about who you have, that's just as good as, in my opinion, having 3 tight ends you feel good about, 5 wide receivers you feel good about, 3 running backs in the era of the transfer portal, NIL, one-time transfer rule. 3 good running backs that you can depend on is a pretty good proposition to have. And it was evident on the practice field. Those reps are getting split in training camp. I know TreVeyon Henderson will be the starter. He will be the bell cow, and he will be the headliner of that room. But if you think that you're going to just forget about Mayan Williams or see a drop-off when Evan Pryor comes on the field for TreVeyon Henderson, you're absolutely mistaken, and I think you'll pay for that as a defense. And so,
you may be seeing, it's like pitches. I mean, you're going to be seeing different pitches from all 3 of those guys, possibly all 4 if Dallin Hayden comes along and plays some. I mean, that's what really stands out to me about this running back room. There is no cookie cutter involved. These guys are all different.
Absolutely.
And they all offer something, some spice there. And Evan Pryor's one of those guys, man, he can hit the edge and go. I mean, he showed that in the spring and stuff. TreVeyon Henderson, as I used that word last year, has got that wiggle, man. He can make you miss in the hole. And then Mayan Williams has a little bit of that, but he also can run right over you. And that's a pretty good little variety to throw at teams.
Tony Alford loves this running back room. And he talks pretty gushingly about his players. He's a very pro player all the time.
Yeah, but you didn't expect to come out here and say he didn't like any of these guys, did you?
No. But, last year at this time, he was talking about the inexperience in the room. He was talking about how they had to get guys up to speed. Now, he has Miyan Williams, who had the first touchdown of the season for Ohio State last year. He has TreVeyon Henderson, who broke multiple freshman rushing records for Ohio State. And he has Evan Pryor, who he said, point blank last year, he wasn't ready. They could have thrown him on the field in certain situations. But overall, as a product, he was not ready. And to say that gives you the idea that he thinks he is ready now. And so now he gets to unleash all 3 of those guys, and you can just tell that Tony Alford is more confident in his room and the experience that it gained and knowing exactly what he has in that room now than he was, not even at this time last year, but even in the spring. You can see that he's pretty he's talking pretty glowingly of this room, and I think he's got a lot of reasons to do so.
It's quite important too, though, because there were games last year when both TreVeyon and Master Teague III weren't available at different points in games, and Mayan Williams went in there and carried the load. Mayan Williams is a guy, I think could really make strides this year if he gets his shot. We know TreVeyon is that kind of special talent. The guy that will run between the tackles but can hit a home run at any moment. He proved that countless times. You probably can't count him up. I'm not going to do it now. But then Evan Pryor is has the very similar potential of any time he has a ball in his hands of taking it to the house. And of course, Mayan Williams did it, against Minnesota.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, so right out of the bat, he kind of like made his point. So that's what stands out about all four of these guys. And Dallin Hayden, one of those guys, he is very fast. He's a one-cut guy and hits a hole and goes. And that's what you want at this level.
Last thing about running backs before we switch over to what we saw on the practice field, because I didn't really see a lot of running backs because they were way down far on the other end of the field. But I'm just going to tell the people watching this video, if you plan on still considering Mayan Williams a bruising running back, you should see him during fall camp. This guy has changed his body. He's slimmed down. He looks like a guy who wants to be on the field and not just in short yardage, not just to be called the meatball or pork chop or whatever nickname you want to give him. That's not really who Mayan Williams is anymore.
I think he gave himself that nickname, pork chop.
Yeah, but he's kind of taken it upon himself to slim down, to make sure that people know he's not just a bruiser.
Yeah.
And if he can add that punishing ability between the tackles and also start to get more north and south, you're talking about a 1-2 punch, and that's not even including Evan Pryor, but a 1-2 experienced punch there with TreVeyon Henderson and Mayan Williams, who could be maybe the best back tandem in the country once the season gets started and people get to see those guys on the field.
So you say he's gone from pork chop to short rib, perhaps. Or at least country rib.
I'm not here to compare meat to him, but
we'll see what his new nickname is as this year goes along. But I agree with you. He has a different look about him, including nice beard and stuff. I mean, he looks older. Let's put it that way. But we got to watch a little. You could see them out of way down there. I keep reminding myself to bring binoculars to these quote open practices. But what stands out to me too is like the mesh that they have with C.J. Stroud now and stuff, whereas this time a year ago, they were still working on all kinds of things, but there's a familiarity there between the quarterback and his running backs and the wide receivers and stuff that's really, you can see it on the practice field.
There were a few different things that we talk about just general what we see on the field and who's flashing. It's not just a flash anymore for JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. Those guys look bulked up. They look ready to go. I wrote about it in the practice observations on LettermenRow.com. Those guys have taken the training program to a level that I'm not sure I've seen a lot of at Ohio State. I know Tuimoloau came in and immediately had to get to work and didn't get a lot of time in the weight room. Jack Sawyer has always been a bigger guy since he got here. But to see those two, and then you see all the other defensive linemen, and that's not knocking Teron Vincent and Jerron Cage and Zach Harrison and Javante Jean-Baptiste and on down the line. But to see what JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer did in the training facility, in the weight room, in the rehab center this offseason is absolutely terrifying for people who are going to try to block them. And I think the sky is the absolute limit for those two.
I think Mickey Marotti would call those, for example, a couple guys like that, choice clay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can make whatever you want to out of these dudes. And, I've had Jack Sawyer on my podcast this week, and he was talking about how much he has changed. But just this is what people have to keep in mind. And we're going to keep hammering this point because Jim Knowles even brings it up. There are guys that went through the ringer last year, one form or fashion, had some flashes, like you said, of good play and some flashes of not good play on this Ohio State defense. Jim Knowles is going to benefit as much from the experience that was gained last year as he is from his own scheme he's putting in, the 4-2-5, and with the Leo and the extra safety on the field at all times. But that's just an example of Ohio State. Even Ohio State, Nick Saban said last year was a rebuilding year for Alabama. They played for the national championship.
Ryan Day could say the same thing.
Exactly. Ryan Day could definitely say the same thing, especially about defensively, but even offensively. They had a first-year starting quarterback, a first-year starting running back when TreVeyon Henderson became the guy, etc. You saw the experiment they did on the offensive line, which worked pretty well most of the time, but not maybe
until it didn't.
A few times when they needed, when push came to shove and they couldn't get it done against Oregon and Michigan, for example, first half against Utah. Now that offensive line, they've got an offensive line, as we pointed out yesterday, it looks like an offensive line. But back to your point, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau were 5 stars for a reason.
Yeah, and they look like they're beginning to become 5-star players, not just 5-star prospects.
Because we haven't seen them do any football yet,
But just, and really, we get to watch stretching and individual drills. They're hitting air, they're hitting the sled, they're hitting the pads. there's no pads on yet, but those guys definitely look the part. And I think that's where the word observations comes in. That's why we use that, because it's not really what we're learning, it's what we're observing.
Like I asked Jack, I said, are you looking forward to maybe dropping off and getting a pick six, out there on the edge, that Leo look? And he goes, he hadn't had one since I think his freshman year in high school. So I mean, the main thing that's going on, and we're seeing enthusiasm, man. These guys, and we always see enthusiasm. Let's don't sugarcoat it that much, but these guys are really fired up about what they're learning and the defense they're playing. It really comes through. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and it extends far beyond the defense. I think that would be selling everyone short, because
no, I'm just talking about specifically about the defense, because you were talking about Sawyer and Tuimoloau, how this defense could look different, just physically is going to look different from a year ago.
The enthusiasm is off the charts, and obviously football's back. Everybody's excited. I'm excited. Tim's excited. But to watch, so Ryan Day broke the huddle with these guys to start practice after stretching, and I watched two grown men, 300-pound offensive linemen, Luke Whippler and Paris Johnson, take off in a dead heat sprint to race each other more than 100 yards to get to Justin Frye to start the individual drills. And then they had to go immediately as the starters into those drills.
Yeah.
You didn't see that from these offensive linemen last year.
Yeah.
You saw them, they got there, but it wasn't that. And I think that really set the tone for that offensive line group, who had a really good, strong first 30 minutes of practice that we got to watch. Those guys look like they're absolutely ready to maul people. And if you have a center and a left tackle that are setting the tone, that's a pretty good start on the offensive line.
I'm just sorry I didn't have my shakiest gun in the West video camera running at that point, because I was marveling at the same thing.
But everybody watched.
These are guys who are enthusiastic about playing football and doing it together. I mean, and I'm watching like Matt Jones and like Enoch Vimahi. He's got to come on. I mean, he has come on in their mind, but he's got to step up. Josh Fryer, I'm talking about backup offensive lineman at the moment.
Yep.
These guys have all got their game has all got to rise to a different level, and you're seeing an enthusiasm about them. And like I pointed out yesterday, they got blocking sleds out there, man.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, the sled is back.
So a couple other news and notes before we get out of here. Marvin Harrison Jr. still looks like a freak. We're going to talk about him all preseason.
No, Marvin Harrison Jr. looks freakier.
Yeah. He's going to be a problem for opposing defenses. Yeah. I'm not sure if a corner is going to be able to cover him. He's so big. A couple other things. Jacob James was snapping the ball to Kyle McCord. I took note of that because that offensive line still a big question mark.
Another name. I've got him in one of my videos I posted.
That second string offensive line is still a bit of an issue, and so if you can have Jacob James come on at the same time, Josh Fryer, Enoch Vimahi, a couple other of those younger guys, Ben Chrisman maybe start to come on, then you start to feel good about the depth of that offensive line. But that's a big development if Jacob James is taking that step, because last year I don't think he was the backup. I think Toby Wilson, in all honesty, was the backup center. So to see Jacob James take that step,
and they always work, for example, with Matt Jones.
Yep.
I mean, just because a guy's the number 2 guy in there, that doesn't mean that's how they would shuffle things if something happened to Whippler. But you're exactly right.
A couple other notes. Everybody's still healthy right now. It's second practice, but clean bill of health for the Buckeyes heading into the weekend. Hotel check-in is Sunday, and the Buckeyes will get back to work, I believe, Saturday and Monday. Tim, anything else before we get out of here and let the content go?
No, I'm much more interested in if we get a few snippets of getting to watch practices next week when they actually start practicing real football.
Yeah.
That's when when the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And this team, these coaches now, the head coaches have to walk a fine line, because you want these guys ready from a physical standpoint. I mean, Ryan Day has promised this is going to be as physical a camp as he can make it and be careful.
Yep.
Well, or do those two things go together? I'm not sure they are. But all these players, all these coaches are aware of the tag they got after that game at Michigan last year, of not being physical, basically being almost soft, vulnerable for sure at certain spots, and they have run with that since then. But especially since the halftime of the Rose Bowl against Utah, this team has had a different edge to it, in my opinion, of the guys that came back, and I think it's carried through so far into the little bit we've gotten to see of camp.
Camp number 2 is in the books for Ohio State. Running backs already been talked to, if that's proper English. Tim and I will be here all
quizzed, I think would be better.
Yeah, for sure. Tim and I will be here all season long, and all year long, covering the Buckeyes for Lettermen Row. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. come hang out with us on the Lettermen Lounge, and we will see you back in here next week for more coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes at Lettermen Row.